This is part 2 of Bible study for everybody from Tuesday night, the 7th of October. As I mentioned in part 1, we managed to race through almost 3 verses of the first chapter of John. Here are the first 2 verses of the first chapter of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. Isn't that an interesting way to start something? Whatever could all that mean? Well, in our discussion, we talked about in the beginning meant not the beginning of God, because God stands outside of time and space and has been eternally, forever there. But rather, beginning refers to the beginning of this creation as we know it, and the beginning of our world. And then it said, in the beginning was the Word. What's a word? What is a word? Well, for one thing, it's a unit of speech by which we express ourselves. Hence, you could make a case for it being the way God has expressed himself to us through the Word. And the Word happens to be a person. You'll notice if we go backwards that after the first sentence we have the pronoun he. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He, a person, a very unique person, was in the beginning with God. He was part of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he was always with God. So it's a unit of word by which God expresses himself. For example, if we read in John 1, verse 18, we read, "No one has ever seen God, the only one, himself God, who is in closest fellowship with the Father, has made God known." The only one, himself, who is in closest fellowship with God, refers to Jesus, has made God known. And in Hebrews, we read, "After God spoke long ago in various portions and various ways to our ancestors through the prophets, in these last days he has spoken to us in a Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he created the world." The Son is the radiance of his glory and the representation of his essence. In other words, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the representation of his essence. In Hebrews 13:8 we read, "Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, unchanging." In Colossians 1, we read, He, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in the Son. And in John 14:9 we read, Jesus speaking, "The person who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father residing in me performs his miraculous deeds. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me." So the argument is that Jesus is God. I will get back to that in a minute, and that God has expressed himself to us through Jesus. Furthermore, the word that John used for word, logos, in the Greek, means, among other things, the great unknown intelligence, the reason behind everything, and divine wisdom. So even though he was writing to the Jews who would understand the word to mean God, in Greek, you can see that the Greek philosophers had the same idea. They didn't express it the same way with the word logos. So let's go back to our first 2 verses. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. There are lots of implications in that. One is that Jesus, the Word, was always existed, was always with God. And in fact, you notice it says, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. You also notice that now John introduces the pronoun he. In other words, he's not just talking about a word, he's talking about he, the person of Jesus Christ. And that led to great discussion. You would have loved it if you had been there. And that's the conclusion of part 2, and we managed to get through most of verses 1 through 3. Next week we'll start probably about John 1, chapter 1, verse 4, and we'll see how far we get. It'll be Tuesday night, 6:30 till 8 o'clock here in Georgetown, Texas. God bless you.